Hi, all. Jerry Foltz here. Excited to talk with you a little bit about some of the research that I've been doing on the medical tourism industry. And I thought I would just lead by saying that I have been involved in that industry as a patient, and I guess not me necessarily, but my son, high school age at the time, needed a bunch of dental work done. And so after evaluating insurance options, we elected to go across the border into Mexico and had some pretty extensive work done by an Ivy League trained dentist there. Uh, and as part of the whole deal, we were able to throw in a trip to Padre Island, and we saved a couple of $1,000s just on some pretty extensive work that he had done. So when we got back to the States and in subsequent years, as he's gone just back in for routine dentist checkups, the work seems to be just top notch, and the US based dentists that we see has been really complimentary of the work. So we had a great experience with it. So just leaning on that, kind of roll over then into some of the class readings. Obviously, the US healthcare industry has been anticipating and mobilizing, or at least preparing for this whole shift to medical tourism for decades, primarily driven by a number of factors, cost being one of them. But there's been a lot of, trial, a lot of hit and miss. So not exactly sure just where this whole thing is headed. And so some insurances will cover some of this, some will cover none of it. In our case, when we went to Mexico, our dental insurance would not cover the procedure, but we found out later that our health savings account, or HSA account, would cover the expense. So we were able to cover all of our out-of-pocket expenses from that. So I think what I glean from that and what I take from that in our class readings is basically this whole area of medical tourism is one that is obviously a growth trend emerging, but the way that the US does healthcare isn't exactly keeping pace with the demand for it. So anyway, I'm sure you found similar things. But anyways, shifting to some of the research that I have done, Business Wire put out a report on June 8th of this year. It's a group of Berkshire Hathaway group, Business Wire, that looked at the industry, and obviously it's kind of come to the standstill during the COVID pandemic. But they anticipate a 10% growth this year, from $20 billion with B to $22 billion with B in medical tourism during this year. And they expect that the medical tourism industry will double to about 40 billion by the year 2025. So obviously a very significant growth industry that they expect will resume once we kind of get back to whatever this new normal turns out to be. Did some additional reading through the International Journal of Health Management. They put out a report on June 6th of this year called Looking Around the Corner, that's trying to anticipate the future of the medical tourism industry post pandemic. And, they noted many of the things that we all know, that international travel basically came to a standstill. Almost 90% of international travel was canceled. Borders were closed during the initial days and months of the pandemic. Much of the medical tourism industry is based on elective surgeries, and obviously almost all of those were postponed. And in the US, elective surgeries, they calculate that hospitals lost, just due to postponing surgeries in the pandemic, they lost about 50 billion with a B per month for March, April, and May during those early months of the pandemic. So coming out of the pandemic, this report anticipates there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, both for elective as well as emergency surgeries. But they anticipate, and I guess this would make sense, that hospitals are going to focus on their domestic markets initially, rather than just immediately rolling out the red carpet to international travelers. They anticipate as well that there'll be a shift from hospitals providing just a whole menu of surgeries, elective surgeries. They'll begin to specialize so that one hospital group may focus on maybe plastic surgeries. Another hospital group may focus on cardiovascular kinds of issues, and so on. And they anticipate that previously competitors may in some ways become allies just through the fact that they're specializing just in specific areas of service delivery. During the pandemic, and this obviously was going on before the pandemic, the shift to telemedicine. They commented extensively on that, and they think that the pandemic actually will give rise to even greater footprint in the whole telemedicine industry, even to the point where you're going to start to see the emergence of things like robotic surgeries, remote surgeries, those kinds of things start to gain a bit of a foothold into the marketplace. And so just the remote medicine during the pandemic has continued in its development, and we think we'll have a greater foothold in the months and years ahead. So just in summary of all of this, we do expect medical tourism to be a big growth industry. There will continue to be a growth industry, probably doubling in size over the next 5 years as we come out of the pandemic, but that it will look differently. To focus more on short-term pent-up elective surgeries initially, and then we'll be layering in just a heightened attention to telemedicine, remote medicine, and so may provide additional options rather than just jumping on a plane and traveling internationally. But they do expect that the whole industry will return nonetheless, and that probably this pause created by the pandemic has also allowed countries like Russia, China, and others who previously weren't substantial players in this space to be able to gain some foothold. So those are just in the allotted time here, some of the initial findings that I came across. I hope you enjoyed reading through and learning about this whole space of medical tourism. Thank you.